All right. I find it interesting that only now is Wes Anderson going viral on the internet. Maybe he did in the past, but in my tweeny bopper years, I wasn't really on Tumblr all that much. I'm not gonna lie, I was not a Tumblr person, and I'm not afraid to admit it. And I didn't realize how many people didn't know his films or who he was until the Wes Anderson trend went viral. To anybody who doesn't know what the Wes Anderson trend is, it's basically when people film their lives as if they were in a Wes Anderson film. Some of them are spot on, and some of them are really good and entertaining to watch, and others, I don't think they've quite grasped the concept. If you go on Instagram in like the explore section, like the explore reel section, and just scroll for even like 30 seconds, you will find 50 of these. Like, it is just everywhere. It is abundant. The sun went down. Oh no. How much time do I have left of sunlight? I have like 15 minutes left of sunlight. Oh no. Wes Anderson films have always stood out to me, and I've always been inspired and have admired the aesthetics of his films, but I didn't realize how much his work impacted my own until I was an undergrad. I went to school to study film, and I was thoroughly convinced that I was going to work in the live action industry for my entire life and work my way up to being a cinematographer, as that was my focus. Back in 2019, when I was 21, my friends and I were filming a short fiction film for one of our classes, and after we had finished filming and put together a rough cut, we went into class for a critique. A classmate of mine raised his hand during critique and said that our shots were very Wes Anderson, and I've held on to that my entire life. I say, even though it's like only 2023. I realized subconsciously I have been looking at Wes Anderson's work and filing everything I take away from it into my brain on little index cards to pull out whenever I'm doing my own work, whether I realize it or not. Now, in the year 2023, I'm no longer focusing on live action as I'm going to grad school for animation, where my focus and heart, as I've been saying it, my aortic pump lies in stop motion. But I'm trying to tie my live action roots and my new stop motion leaves together. Because of that, I feel that it's important to talk about Wes Anderson's stop motion films and how they stand out stylistically from other stop motion films out there currently, specifically focusing on Fantastic Mr. Fox, since that was his first stop motion film, and also talking about Laika's films because they helped set the precedent for stop motion films. But especially now that Wes Anderson is getting so much attention from people who had never heard of him, or people who have heard of him and just had never seen his films before, I figured that, with this viral trend going around on the internet, which I will also absolutely be participating in, probably, unless I completely forget about it until the trend dies, like I've done for every single internet trend. I hop on way too late, and then it's just buried in the ground already. But because of that, I figured that, talking about this would be interesting. For people not aware of who Wes Anderson is, and who don't look at the internet, Wes Anderson is a director and writer who primarily does live action. He has a live action background. Before Fantastic Mr. Fox, there was The Darjeeling Limited, The Life Aquatic, Royal Tenenbaums, Rushmore, and of course Bottle Rocket, all live action films. Since Fantastic Mr. Fox, Wes Anderson has also released Moonrise Kingdom, which is my favorite, The Grand Budapest Hotel, which is probably the most popular live-action film that he has, Isle of Dogs, which is the second of his stop-motion films after Fantastic Mr. Fox, and The French Dispatch, which came out in 2021, with The Wonderful Story of Henry Sugar, which is another Roald Dahl adaptation, and Asteroid City, which is coming out later this year, which I'm pretty sure is how the Wes Anderson trend started. Like most of us who grew up with a TV, Wes Anderson grew up watching the Rankin Bass stop-motion animated holiday films, the ones that would show on TV every single year, and I think still do to this day, even though they were made in like the 60s and 70s. If you don't think you've seen them, I can guarantee you that you have, unless you're like 5 and watching this, or you live under a rock, which is completely valid. That's fine. It's completely valid if you're 5 years old. Actually, no, it's not. Get off the internet. From his childhood watching these films, Wes Anderson has said that he's always been interested in stop-motion animation, and after his long filmography of live-action films, that he wanted to make a stop-motion film. Specifically one with puppets with fur. In every single interview that I've read, that was like his number one thing that he wanted to do before he even knew what he wanted to make a film about, which is why he decided to adapt Roald Dahl's Fantastic Mr. Fox. Another reason being that Fantastic Mr. Fox had not had a feature adaptation yet, and also because it was the first book that Wes Anderson remembers owning and reading, so he had that sentimental attachment to it. It's apparent in his stop-motion films that Wes Anderson has held on to the more analog style of filmmaking that older films, live action, or animation used in the 40s, 50s, and 60s. Since then, though, production companies, Laika in particular, have influenced the art of stop motion, introducing and putting in practice innovative techniques and stylistic qualities that other filmmakers and production companies aspire to acquire. This is similar in how Pixar has set the standard for CG films. Off the top of my head, I can't even think of a CG film that doesn't have the Pixar aesthetic and look to it, except for Shrek. And maybe Shark Tale. Which just goes to show that as time continues, more and more films have styles closely related to the Pixar look because of how Pixar has influenced and set the standard of visual appeal of 3D films for audiences. And Sony is now doing the same, starting with Into the Spider-Verse and moving on to The Mitchells vs. the Machines. And now other production companies have picked up on this positive reaction from audiences to this aesthetic design choice and are implementing them into their own films, even if it makes no sense, looking at no one in particular. For stop motion, Laika has influenced the visual appeal of stop motion films for audiences and has set the standard for stop motion films going forward. Laika embraces advancements in technology, and thinking of Coraline specifically, which was Laika's first feature film, they 3D printed replacement faces for their characters so they could have wide ranges of expression, but also so that the puppets would keep their clean, refined look. They used green screens to shoot some of their scenes and also would use winders and pulleys to animate even the smallest things like blades of grass. You can tell that visually, Laika still aims to have that claymation type quality to a lot of their stop motion films, regardless of if their puppets are made of plasticine or not, but they still have that smooth skin look that is a nod to claymation animations. Whereas with Mr. Fox, Wes Anderson really wanted his puppets to have a rugged look, and he used real hair and fur for the puppets to get that natural boil that we see on the characters in the final film. He even went as far as taking and cutting, with their permission, hair off of crew members on the set of Fantastic Mr. Fox to use for the puppets, which is just so bizarre and hilarious. And actually, like, when I heard that, I have hair that I kept from my haircuts, and it's given me some great, terrible ideas. But ignoring that, comparing fur to specifically Laika's approach, for Missing Link, Laika is still aiming to have that cleaner fur look. The fur on Susan looks smooth and does not have much boil at all, and you can tell that there was a lot of focus put into making Susan's movements as clean as possible with the movement of the fur. I personally love Laika's films, and Missing Link I think right now is one of my favorites, but comparing Missing Link and Fantastic Mr. Fox, and understanding just how clean Laika's approach is to stop motion animation, part of me wants to ask the question, to a small degree, then why stop motion? Which normally I wouldn't give one thought to, and I haven't until now, but because I'm analyzing and comparing different approaches, I just feel like I need to ask that question. Laika's films have become so fine-tuned in movement since Coraline, and it is almost hard to tell that they're stop-motion films. Give them a higher frame rate and they could easily pass as CG films. These films do still have the magical qualities of stop-motion films, which you can tell in the fabrication and the set design, but the movement of the characters has become so smooth that I almost wish that Laika would start playing around with techniques and aim less for perfection and more with creative style, recognizing that their current way of animating is a style in and of itself, but I think they could push it further. Laika has set such a high standard for what stop-motion films could look like and has created this reputation for itself that I think that if they were to break away from their more refined, near-perfect looking animated films, it would go one of two ways. Either one, they would be applauded that they tried something different, breaking outside of the box set they built themselves, I might add. Or two, because of the high standard that they've set for themselves, critics and audiences could have a reaction like, what happened? They could be disappointed, they could think that it tanked, which would be extremely unfortunate because already we don't have that many stop motion features, and even though there aren't that many 2D features either, but compared to 2D and 3D, especially, We don't need less funding for stop motion films. It is the sun has pretty much gone down at this point, so that is why the lighting keeps getting weird and keeps changing, because I'm playing with settings as that's happening. But moving on, going back to Wes Anderson though, with Fantastic Mr. Fox, he has set a reputation for himself embracing the flaws of stop motion, even when questioned and told that it wouldn't do well in box office or with audiences because it has a less polished, refined look. Quoting Wes Anderson, "Old-fashioned special effects tend to appeal to me, as does the challenge of getting it in the camera. There's a handmade feeling to it, there's an imperfection that doesn't really qualify as an imperfection because it's the real thing." It is worth noting in this comparison that Wes Anderson has said that he doesn't even want to think about what the You are so loud. Thanks, man. Have a good day. It is worth noting in this comparison that Wes Anderson has said that he doesn't even want to think about what the target demographic is for Fantastic Mr. Fox. He says, "I don't really like the movement in children's movies. I'm not fond of this thing where it gets so clean and safe. Instead, we tried to keep it free and a bit wilder." And this could be a reason why Laika's films are so visually clean, so that they appeal to everyone, children and adults alike. But this did not seem to be something that Wes Anderson cared about. He just wanted to make what he wanted to make, and he did it. With the reputation Wes Anderson has set for himself with stop-motion films, I don't think he can tarnish it, and so far with Isle of Dogs, he hasn't. At times while making this video essay, I have thought that it maybe is a little unfair to compare Wes Anderson's stop-motion films to Laika's. Wes Anderson is known to be an extremely avid planner and so careful with his choices, to the point where he rewrote half the film of Fantastic Mr. Fox while they were in production. During animation. Which seems so contradictory to his character, but that's something that Laika doesn't really have the freedom to do. Comparing one filmmaker and his team to an entire stop-motion production company is again a little unfair. Laika's animations are stunning, and in order to keep their business afloat, they have to be careful with their decisions, and they can't just change, big things about their productions on a dime like how Wes Anderson can and has. Wes Anderson has more freedom to do that because even though he has an entire crew of people relying on him for income, if he screws up, he does not tank a production company. He does not lose business. Maybe he loses the project. Maybe he can't make the film anymore, but he can make another film with a different production company. This is not something that I've extensively researched the legalities of. That is a hard word to say, and it would be interesting to research more, but it is just something that I wanted to keep in mind. And it's not like Laika's not killing it with their beautiful, gorgeous animated films, right? But maybe that's why Wes Anderson's rugged, more handmade feeling stop-motion films stand out stylistically and artistically, because it would be too risky for a big stop-motion production company like Laika to make those decisions. Just in case it's not taken well in box office and they lose a lot of money, they could go out of business. So yeah, I found that comparing Wes Anderson's stop-motion films to Laika's is difficult to do. They both have great artistry in their own right, but I find it refreshing that Fantastic Mr. Fox stands out because of its ruggedness and, not wanting to look perfect. Wes Anderson was going for perfection on a different level than Laika. Wes Anderson wanted perfect in mood and story. He wanted to record the actors' dialogues on location, so if there was a scene taking place in a chicken coop, they would actually go to a chicken coop, and they would use whatever sounds they picked up behind the actors' dialogue and figure out how to use it. They recorded a sound of a boat, and they turned it into a plane in one scene. Wes Anderson took his live-action approach and brought it to the production of a stop-motion feature. He used out-of-the-ordinary techniques that studios dedicated to making stop-motion films don't use because it's not in their pipeline, it's in a live-action pipeline. Having a stop-motion film that was created by a live-action director and writer gave Fantastic Mr. Fox something that I had not seen before in stop-motion films, and I can't quite put my finger on, a word to describe that. But again, coming from a live-action background myself, learning about Wes Anderson's approach and techniques for this film was inspiring and insightful, and I've taken a lot from it, and I filed this new info into my brain on index cards to pull out when I am making my own stop motion films, hopefully this time on purpose. So in conclusion, while it is still way too early to know whether Wes Anderson's style of stop motion features has influenced the industry enough to where we stop seeing such refined, perfect stop-motion films, mostly because there haven't been enough produced to ever track that, and also because GDT's Pinocchio, nobody can influence that man. Like, he did that on his own. At least Wes Anderson has proved that you can make a stop motion film embracing the flaws of the art and have it be successful. It has gotten so dark in this car. So I look forward to the future of the stop motion industry and seeing what films come out of it, and to see if there's more filmmakers and production companies that take the risk and add their own like artistry to their films. And as much as I love Laika's work and I hope that they continue down the path that they want to continue down, because like it's amazing, I kind of want people to stop looking at the way that one person does something and just repeating it over and over and over again. There needs to be more artistic diversity in this industry. And maybe, just maybe, I will be a part of that future. Too soon to tell though, because I still have to graduate. But that's the tea on that. All right. Time to go home.
Double pneumonia? It isn't really that big of a deal, is it?
They want to trade the son for his papa.